In this video, we are going to be doing one example of completing the square. Now, with that sum that's in front of you right now, I just want to highlight something to you, and that's a point while we are completing the square where students kind of forget what to do from this point. So I'll also highlight it to you when we get to the actual example of completing the square, what to do from this point. So in other words, how do we solve for x? How do we solve an equation when we get to a point where it is in this form? Do you have an idea? What I see a lot of students do is they start foiling out. They start foiling it and blah, blah, blah. And then we get to our trinomial. And that's all mathematically sound and fine. But then we're working in circles. We are not completing the square. And like I said, I'll emphasize that to you when we get to the completing the square example. Because if we get to that point and we FOIL it out, we can use factorization or we can use the quadratic formula to solve for x, but that's not the question. When they say solve for x by completing the square, then it's the only method that we can use. Okay, I hope you listen to all of that waffling. We need to get the square root on both sides, right? If I get the square root on the left, I am staying true to my equal when I just get the square root of the right-hand side as well. What is left on the left? I've got my x minus 3 would be equal to plus or minus 5 because we need those two solutions, right? Because this is a quadratic equation and both those values satisfies the square root. So if I've got 5 squared, that would give me 25. And if I've got a negative 5 and I square that, that will also give me a positive 25. So both those solutions needs to be considered there. Okay, so what will be our two solutions? It's either x minus 3 is equal to positive 5 or x minus 3 is equal to negative 5. Okay, so there will be our two solutions. Perfect. I just wanted to refresh your memory on this. Let's get into that example. So the instruction is solve for x by completing the square, something along those lines. Okay, let's go through our steps. Our a value needs to be 1. We want our a value to be 1, so that's going to be our first thing that we're going to do. What are we going to do? Well, let's take out a common factor of 3. 12 divided by 3, and then this divided by 3. I know that you don't like working with fractions, or most of you anyway. That's okay. All right, now we get to that point. And then what I'm going to do, a lot of you, I've seen a lot of my students that they kind of keep that 3 and they tag it along, which is perfectly fine. I just find that you're making your life a little bit harder where you have to complete this square working with inside this bracket and then they're not sure whether they should do it outside the bracket, inside the bracket, whatever. Sorry, I hope I didn't just confuse you there already. What I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by 3 because I'm working in the equation, right? So if I divide the left-hand side by 3, that's going to go away. And the 0 divided by 3 is still just 0. So that is all good. We can do that. Now we are at this point. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to move my constant term to the other side. Why am I doing that? Well, 5 over 3, that constant does not create a perfect square, a trinomial on the left-hand side. What is a perfect square trinomial? It's when you've got something like x plus something that is being squared. So in other words, you've got two of the same brackets when it is in factored form. So I'm going to link a video to what completing the square is. You'll see it now on the screen and I'll put it in the link in the description as well. But what are we doing when we are completing the square? So I am leaving those two. I am moving that one to the other side because now we want to see what on earth are we supposed to add over here that will turn the left-hand side into a perfect square trinomial. Let's have a look. How do we do that? Well, we are going to take our b value. There is our b value. We're going to take our b value, we're going to divide it by 2, and then we are going to square that. And that value is what completes the square. So let's go ahead and do that. In this case, my b value is 4, and I'm dividing that by 2, and I'm going to square that. 4 divided by 2 is 2 that is being squared, which is equal to 4. Now, both of these values are useful. So we are adding 4, that 4 completes the square. Now the left-hand side is a perfect square trinomial. But with an equation, we can't just add 4 on the left-hand side of the equation and change to the whole sum. We need to also just balance it out and do the exact same thing on the right-hand side. Okay, great. Now, what is our perfect square trinomial that forms on the left? It will be x plus 2. It's just half of what that b value is. And then we've got that perfect square trinomial. We can actually just have a look and see. If we follow that out, x squared plus 2x plus another 2x plus 4. Can you see that it is going to get us back there? Okay, perfect. So we just factorize that. And let's just quickly put those together. I'm actually reaching for my calculator. Maybe you already have the answer without your calculator. And that gives us 7 over 3. Do you see that we are now at this point where I just highlighted to you in the beginning of this video, where I find that students now did all that hard work of completing the square, but now they start foiling it out again. Then you're working backwards and you're going to land up there again, somewhere there anyway. And so now, what did we see in the previous reminder? We're going to get the square root on this side and the square root of that side. So then we're going to be left with x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 7 over 3. That's not a perfect square, so we just keep that root over there. So then we'll have our two solutions. It's either x plus 2 is equal to positive that, or x plus 2 is equal to negative that. So also make sure that you read the question carefully. If you can leave this in surd form, or if you must round this off, say, as 2 decimal places. So if I'm going to put that into my calculator, just give me a moment. So I've got the square root, and then I've got 7 over 3. Oopsie. Minus, make sure that the minus 2 isn't under the square root, hey? So I'm just going to write that as a decimal. X would be equal to negative 0.47. But like I said, sometimes they say leave it in surd form. That's fine. Then you do that. Obviously, then you have to do that. And this one would be negative 3,5. 3 rounded off to 2 decimal places. And there we solved for x by completing the square. Now try some of these on your own.